I want to thank you all for coming. I think almost all of you know me over the years. Welcome to the Santa Maria Country Club and the NARO California Town Hall meeting. I think you all know why we're here. The threats to our mineral rights and royalty interests are great and severe. And what the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors has just done with regards to exploring their proposed onshore oil shutdown really prompted getting this done kind of quickly here. I want to start by acknowledging some people who are here, and I'm very happy that they are here. I want to thank Santa Maria Alice Patino for being here. Thank you very much, and thank you for your support over the years. Bob Nelson, Santa Barbara County Supervisor, District 4. Thank you, Bob, so much for being a consistent fighter for oil, ag, and business. We really, really appreciate you, sir. And I've known you, I don't know how many years now, but thank you. Aaron Hankey, where'd he go? There he is. That's Chief of Staff for Bob Nelson. Thank you for all you do too. We also have with us Corey Bantalon, Chief of Staff for 5th District Supervisor Steve Lavanino. Steve couldn't be here tonight, but he's always been a supporter too. And Corey is running for 5th District Supervisor. As you know, Steve is retiring. So congratulations and thank you for running. I also have here Maribel Hernandez. Maribel is on the Santa Maria City Council, District 4, and she also is a candidate for the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors, District 5. So we have two candidates here who are both supportive of oil. So thank you very much. And Maribel was on our neighborhood board for many years, up until fairly recently, and she's been a good friend of mine for many years. We have quite a history. Also, I would like to thank Roy Reed, a very supportive member of NARO, Santa Barbara County royalty owner, friend, and he is County Planning Commissioner for District 4. He and I working together. He was on the board for quite a few years, and he still contributes by writing articles for us, one of which is in your packet here tonight. I urge you to read it. It's excellent, and he discusses what went on at the Board of Supervisors meeting on May 13th. We have Vincent Martinez here, who I've known for many years. He's local attorney, oil and gas, royalty owners. He does it all. He's County Planning Commissioner for District 5, and he's been an active member of NARO for many years. I've seen him in Texas, Oklahoma, at our conventions, so on and so forth. So thank you, Vince, for your support and for being here. As many of you know, I was on the Farm Bureau board here for quite a number of years, and Terry Bontrager, the executive director, was going to stop by tonight. I don't know whether she's going to make it, but she had a meeting in Buellton and she was going to stop by on her way home. I hope she does. I also want to give a big thank you to Klaus Hasbo and Phil Brown with PCEC. There's Phil. Welcome, Phil. They reached out to their royalty owners, notifying them this meeting, and I really appreciate that. And they've been supportive of our efforts. And also Ted Cordova and Steve Lake with E&B Natural Resources. Thank you very much for being supportive all these years. They're not here right now, but they reached out to their royalty owners too. So we really appreciate that. Thank you. What I want to try to do this evening is let you know what's going on a statewide basis, a little history of a few things. And I want you to get angry and scared of what's happening if you aren't already. As you know, the attacks on oil, ag, and business in this state have been severe, and they continue. We're going to tell you the progress we've made what we're planning, a little bit about what we're planning to do in the future, but also give you some hope. There is new opportunity, and we will explain that. We believe there is. We will see. First, a little brief history of NARO. NARO was founded in, many of you are members, but those of you that aren't, please join. I want to let you know that in your packet here, you can join as a paid member. It's normally $150 a year for an individual membership. They have a half price $75 introductory membership for the first year for anyone who hasn't been a member before. And they've given NARO Californians an additional $25 off if you enter the promo code NARO Cal. It's on these slips. So if you can join, great. And if you can't, at the paid level, you can go on our website and join as an associate member. It's free. You won't get all the benefits of full membership, but you'll get our state newsletter and notifications of various pieces of legislation and things like that. So please join at some level. As a matter of fact, if you don't mind, I'd like to make everyone here an associate member tonight. So that's what we're going to do. History of NARO. NARO was founded in 1980. The Carter administration had put in windfall profits tax on the oil companies. That, of course, trickled down to royalty owners, taken out of their royalty share. Some royalty owners got together. They were upset about it. They hired a top public affairs lobbyist type person. They raised money and they worked with the oil industry to fight the windfall profits tax. And their idea was to get the other faces of oil out there, not just the oil companies, but you people. And they did it. And it evolved from a political organization into an educational organization, teaching royalty owners how to negotiate leases, how to read their royalty statements, how to do title curative, plan their estates, all that sort of thing. And when I first got into it, that's what we were doing. California now is right back to the political. It doesn't make any sense to teach you how to read your royalty statement if you're at imminent danger of losing it. So that's what we evolved into. The history of NARO California. It was founded in 2013, and it was a result of me not knowing anything about the oil industry and being approached by a landman to lease some of our family's mineral rights that I didn't even know we owned at the time. And then I saw what they had to go through to try to get permits in Santa Barbara County. We're in Cat Canyon Field. And I thought, wow, as a royalty owner, I better get active. That oil company can invest anywhere they want. Capital is going to flow in the direction of least resistance and highest return. And I won't even know that they're making a decision to invest more in a lease they have in Kern County or in Oklahoma or somewhere else. And so I better get active and help the industry get these permits and cut through all the BS they have to cut through. And that's what got me active. So that's the history of NARO California as far as its founding. But then we went on the first political the first political effort we ever had was fighting Measure P right here in Kern County. And we joined with the farmers, the cattlemen, everyone kind of stepped up in the North County. And we worked together very well. And we were able to defeat Measure P. So we went on from there to fighting many other measures throughout the state. And then we went on to litigation, and I will be discussing that later. But tonight is going to be kind of casual. I want people to ask questions. Feel free to interrupt me. I don't know about the other speakers, but we're going to end up with talking about the litigation we've been involved in and some things we're looking at doing moving forward. Now, we are a 501c6 nonprofit. I'm a volunteer. All of our board are volunteers. We don't get paid for our time, but we do have expenses. We would love for people to donate. You can do it online or come see me. We're trying to raise quite a bit of money right now. We want to do these throughout the state. But right now, what we're going to do is we're going to have Bob Nelson come up here. Supervisor Bob Nelson, who has really been an advocate for us, and he's going to discuss the proposed oil shutdown ordinance, the onshore oil shutdown ordinance status, et cetera. So give a big round of applause to Bob. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. My support of gas goes back quite some time. I'm actually a grandson of an oil worker that worked out at the Ventura Avenue field after he got out of World War II. From there, once our family went a different route, we came into the Santa Maria Valley. And after my dad passed away, my mom got a job at Union Oil so that she could be home at night, so that she could make sure she made it to our Little League games. And so, when I talked about the families that are impacted by these jobs in this industry, I'm talking about my own story, my own family. That's something that really is passionate for me. This isn't about, it's not really a politics for me. This is very personal. And so that's always why I've been a strong supporter of oil and gas, especially in Santa Barbara County and in my district. Just for the rest of you, the 4th district, many of you already know what that is, but it is the largest area in the county for oil and gas operations. 80% of the active and the inactive oil wells are in my district. And so when this ordinance that was proposed at the Board of Supervisors came up, it was very personal to me, because this not only impacts our county and our economy in our county, but it definitely impacts my district. And, this idea that we move forward with banning oil and gas in our county is really destructive. And the way it was done in the first place was through kind of a backdoor measure. We have in our county what we call the Sustainability Division. And this is not a normal county department. This is something that was embedded in our county by Doss Williams, former assemblyman and thankfully former supervisor. He worked hard to put in ideas and concepts and funding for a division within our community services department to get additional funding for clean energy programs. This division also worked on our county's climate action plan. And a climate action plan is something that's required by the state of California. And they used our climate action plan to backdoor this oil and gas shutdown. With the sustainability division, they have quite a few NGOs working alongside of them on some of these efforts. And some of these efforts are also, their overall goal to stop oil and gas operations in Santa Barbara County. I often call it economic martyrdom is what we're doing here in Santa Barbara County. We continue to use oil and gas at a great amount here. We definitely have the demand for it, but somehow my colleagues and some of our constituents that live down on the South Coast live in a bubble that think that somehow if they can ban it in their county, that somehow that they can save the world, which we all know is just completely false. So on May 13th at the Board of Supervisors, there was an item that came before us where we were going to discuss potentially how do we apply our climate action plan to the oil and gas industry. And how this has worked in other industries, it's usually building codes. So like if we're going to build a new house, what kind of standards are going to be done? Are you going to not use natural gas? Now you're going to use electricity? How is it going to be clean energy? How are we going to reduce greenhouse gases? And so a lot of our work in this efforts up until this point had been towards future development. It hadn't been on looking back at what we're currently doing in the county. But with the work of one of our county employees, Garrett Wong, he's the director of the Sustainability Division. He worked with some of these NGOs and with a couple of supervisors, Supervisor Capps, Laura Capps from the 2nd District and Supervisor Joan Hartman out of the 3rd District, to include in there a proposal to begin to phase out oil and gas in Santa Barbara County. And obviously this is something that is, obviously very visceral for all of us. But this is something that was made possible by, I believe that there was Assembly Bill 3233. Is that what, Ed, is that what what's this 3233? In the past, this is something that when many of these shutdown ordinances had been proposed in other jurisdictions, NARO and some of our other partners have taken this to court and have determined that local jurisdictions didn't have the right to regulate this. And so 3233 was an assembly bill that signed by the governor that allowed local jurisdictions, in theory, to begin to ban or at least regulate oil and gas, which opens the door for them to potentially ban that. So at this point, we had a hearing. The board direction at that point was a 3-to-1 vote. Supervisor Lavanino, Corey's boss,
was actually visiting his ailing mother up in Idaho. Again, I often call this a snow job because, there was no preparation, there was no notice for any of the board members. And something of, this significant of an importance in our county's economic future definitely deserved a hearing of all 5 members. But unfortunately, they weren't interested in dissenting opinions. They were more interested in pushing this forward. And, I've talked to Ed, I've talked to others, and, I know a lot of you want to, make this academic issue or this economic issue of why this would be bad for our county. I want to make sure you guys all know that they don't care. There's not an economic argument you can make. There's not a legal argument you can make. This is completely political theater. This is absolutely is all really pushing something that's bigger than all of us. This is really coming out of the South Coast and among many of these leaders, in part because of what happened federally with the national election. With Trump getting elected, a lot of environmental progressives in our county and in our country have taken that loss really personally, and they've been trying to find ways to go out and having some positive acts so they can go fundraise with some of their nonprofits. And this is exactly what's happened here, with not only the national election, but what you've seen happen with Exxon and Sable having some success with getting that pipeline fired up. They've taken a lot of losses in their circles. And so we here on the onshore oil and gas, we were kind of collateral damage is frankly what it was for that political movement there. They were not winning, at the Coastal Commission or weren't winning at the federal level. So they started to take it out on us. I fought hard at the board to say, hey, this isn't my backyard. You guys should work with me on this. There are some things that we can do and work with the oil industry to solve some of these problems. It's just as many as there is oil wells in my district. I also am the home of the most idle and orphaned and abandoned wells in my district as well. We have about 50-50 in our state, about 1,200 oil wells in my or countywide, and we have about the same that are idle or potentially abandoned. We need to deal with that issue. And that's not an issue that we're going to be able to deal with if we're not working side by side with the oil industry of the future. So it's something that I proposed to my colleagues was, let's take a step back. Let's look at some different alternatives to banning oil and gas. Maybe we should sit down with the industry, have some conversations, really work on trying to solve some of the problems that they're after. There are a lot of innovative ways to reduce greenhouse gases in the oil industry, but really there was really no interest in that. The one concession that we did get out of it was when I originally asked if they were going to be moving forward with this oil and gas ordinance, if they were going to do CEQA or environmental review. Originally, staff shook their head that no, they were not planning on doing it. They were planning on just implementing the ordinance. Luckily, Supervisor Hartman, who is a true believer, said, well, of course we'll do CEQA. Well, that I think really opened up an opportunity for us. For those of you guys that are not familiar with CEQA, which most of you are, it can be a very extensive process. And where they're going to evaluate the environmental impacts of this. And so one of my goals and and Steve's as well is to make sure when they go through environmental review on this, that they're able to do a full environmental review. It's not just what does it mean to stop oil and gas operations here, but what does that mean for replacement oil and gas for our community and for our state? We all know that if you're not producing it locally, you're producing it somewhere else. But that does have an environmental impact. So we're going to take a look at that. Also, part of the environmental study includes doing alternative studies or alternative projects. I'm going to be requesting that we look into an alternative project where we do something like what they're doing in Kern County, where they're potentially abandoning wells for the rights to continue operating and drilling wells. So I'm going to actually ask for that to be another studied project. The initial direction is to come back in October with a timeline on what that's going to look like, what's that going to cost for us to go through this process. I was in a meeting yesterday in closed session where it was mentioned this is probably going to take at least 2 years. I think that that's good news for all of us, because there are other jurisdictions that are fighting these same fights. NARO's on the ground with various lawsuits. I'm hopeful that these things happening in front of Santa Barbara County might give us an opportunity to allow some of those court cases to start to hit and might educate and hopefully give decision makers in Santa Barbara County to take a step back away from this really difficult and unfortunate position that they're taking at the board. So that's the environment. That's what's going on right now. Again, we're going to hear back in October. Likely, I would imagine that we'll move forward. I can't imagine that this board would do anything but that at this point. You know, but it will be a long and lengthy fight. You know, but they're already saying it's gonna take 2 years to do an environmental document. I've never seen one ever come in on time. So you may be looking at 3 or 4 years, which is good, because then we also have other elections that can take place between now and then, and might be able to get some sympathetic board members. So that's the environment we're looking at moving forward. And I'm here to answer any questions any of you might have. Many of you, we all know each other, and you can definitely reach out to myself, Aaron. I've dropped off my business card for many of you. Those of you who are online, there's a slide, I believe, that might be up with my cell phone number. So that's available. Our office tries to be as available as possible for your needs. And question from Roy, my very capable planning commissioner.
I think you really need to be commended for your defense and support of the industry in that meeting, and further for your poise and self-control. I didn't see you were emotional, but poise and self-control you exhibited in the front of that ambush. I originally titled the article something other than ambush, but I was told you couldn't bring up. But aside from that, one of the points you made about the close association between NGOs and the sustainability department, for some who may not know what an NGO signifies, we're talking about long time extreme environmental groups like the Environmental Defense Center, SPCAN, Center for Biological Diversity, and others. From time to time, I think it has to have their own offices inside of that building. So we're facing a really ideological crusade.
Right.
So thank you for your support.
Thank you. And for those that were online, Roy was complimenting me, which was really nice. And then he was talking about the different NGOs, the Environmental Defense Center, the Sierra Club, the Center for Biological Diversity, all of these typical organizations that really do this. I mean, I know some of them believe in it, but it really is a fundraising mechanism for them. You know, Santa Barbara County is, just just as much as it's good for tourism, it's good for fundraising. You know, we are kind of the tip of the spear when it comes to in the environmental movement. You know, they like to, they're very proud that we're the birthplace of the environmental movement. The first Earth Day was in Santa Barbara County. You're also seeing, with immigration, which is another hot topic that I'm glad not to be talking about, that we're the tip of the spear as well on that nationally. So we definitely have all these issues hitting our county. And, it's really important to have organizations like NARO because we are outnumbered. What's happening on the other side of this discussion is that you have people that are professional advocates that are out there in the community. And we really don't have a lot on our side. We have a lot of people that are in the business community, they have other interests, other investments, but we don't have a lot of professional people that are working out there advocating for us. And so when we have volunteers like Ed with their NARO, and we've got Ben Oakley here with WISPA, and then we got Sheila's son Rock over there at SIPA. We've got some in our corner, but we do need more. We need to make sure that we're investing in these associations that can actually employ people who can stay on top of this type of stuff. Because it is difficult. We're often fighting with at least one arm tied behind our back, sometimes two. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Mary. It's for the people online.
So just a clarification. So the ordinance is specifically a gas and oil ordinance, or is it part of the climate, or is the ordinance an action plan?
So the climate action plan is a programmatic plan that we have in a set of policies. Some of them will touch land use in the building department. This is actually going to be added to our long-range work plan for the planning and development department, where there'll be a land use ordinance that will be created. Again, some of these other jurisdictions have done these bans. It's not only a ban on future new wells, but they also are going to begin an amortization process, often up to about 20 years, where they'll eventually say that you cannot use your oil and gas operations, your structure after a period of time. And so that's what they're pushing towards. A lot of those amortization periods have been fought in court. There's some legal precedent for it. It's kind of some undeveloped law in this space, and it's going to be an issue. One of the good questions that Ed's been asking a long time is you can't amortize mineral rights, right? You know, if anything, we're now prohibiting you from being able to use and operate them. So, I mean, I think you all in this room that are mineral rights owners are a big part of this discussion. You know, it seems like a takings to me if we're no longer allowing you to recover your asset that you own and that we tax. At some point, somebody's got to pay you for that. You know, unless it's, you know, called another. So, we'll keep having those conversations and trying to work, for you. James.
Politically, Bob, are there other counties or anybody who's further ahead of us on this?
Well, I think the city of LA, I think some of the stuff in the LA basin has been a little bit ahead of us on this. Again, my job and my goal is going to be dragging our feet. I'm going to try to throw as much at this as possible to slow it down as long as I can. You know, I'm going to use the same tactics they also use on you for your development. I'm going to try to use those same tactics on them to slow them down as long as we possibly can and see if the law can, you know, evolve in front of us. Maybe the political tides might churn, but right now we have a board that is pretty, you know, captive of those interests. I know there's a lot of hope with First District Supervisor Lee. You know, he is a difficult one to pin down. I'll just put it that way. He's a very sympathetic person, but we haven't yet been able to cash that check on getting a reliable vote for common sense yet. All right, well, thank you guys all. I'm gonna end up, I've had a long week. I'm gonna be jumping out a little early here, but I want to thank you guys all. You guys can all reach me at any time. You know, our office tries to stay as accessible for all of you. And thank you, Ed, for all the work you're doing and appreciate that. Keep up the good work. Keep up the fight.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. We're going to be discussing the amortization issue, the constitutionality of 3233, the other battles that we've undertaken successfully in Monterey County, Ventura County, and Los Angeles. It's all relevant to what we're talking about here. If you, in your packets, you'll notice there's a letter that I wrote, or NARO California submitted as public comment on the oil shutdown ordinance that was part of the public comments of the Board of Supervisors meeting on May 13th. And combined with that is a letter from our general counsel, Ed Renwick, who came all the way from Los Angeles today and is sitting right here discussing basically the unconstitutionality of what they're trying to do. And so take those with you, read them. I want to thank Roy for writing an incredible article. He always does. And yes, we did change the headline because it wouldn't pass muster. But I agreed with it wholeheartedly. Okay. Next up, as you all know, all of the oil industry has been under attack, including our refineries, our pipelines, everything, in addition to your mineral rights. Without the refineries, without the pipelines, without the infrastructure, got nowhere to take our oil. And so coming up next is Ben Oakley, Senior Manager, State and Coastal Issues, Western States Petroleum Association. We've known each other 15 years, something like that?
Longer.
Or longer. He's going to be presenting Energy on the Edge, demand, supply chain threats, and economic consequences. And thank you, Ben, for the placemats. They are going to go along with his presentation. So please give a warm welcome to Ben.
Well, they told me I can walk around with a microphone, so I prefer to do that because I have some slides I want to reference. And then also my throat is a little scratchy, so bear with me if I lose my voice momentarily. But great to be here, and also so appreciative of Supervisor Nelson and the steady hand and leadership that he's shown in this region for so long. My name is Ben Oakley, Western States Petroleum Association. But I have ties in Santa Barbara County going back for quite some time. I worked in many of the local oil fields, including a stint at Pacific Coast Energy, which I enjoyed up on the hill, a beautiful oil field. And I also spent some time in Cat Canyon. So I do know some of the royalty owners. I was on the other side of the table when we were talking about some of the terms of of our production, but great to be here and thanks for all of you for being here tonight. So I'm just going to step out here and look. Do we have the slides up? Okay, great. Yeah, this sort of.
Do you want to use the clicker or you want me to advance?
If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so this is really like an hour-long presentation. I've got about 20 minutes, so we're gonna move through quickly. But I really want to focus on the most important stuff. So let's just go right into the first slide. And so the big picture for California is we just have to understand this is a massive market. And when they talk about tinkering with our fuel supply, you have to understand this is not some small market that they're messing with. This is a massive market. It's 10 million gallons of diesel, 37 million gallons of gasoline, and 1 million gallons of jet fuel consumed every single day in the state of California. Excuse me. Okay, next. And then, commensurate with that are the commute times. This is a state that has some of the highest commute times. Some of the numbers referenced are, a little bit over an hour in San Francisco, about the same in the LA area. So, we're a people that spend a lot of time in our cars and, there are, something like 36 million vehicles on the road. So huge market and, a lot of miles traveled. Okay, next. And then just, we'll just skip over this. It's a big market. It's a big place. So you hear people talk about it as if it's some simple thing that they're going to do. Hey, we're going to make some changes to the market. We hear the leadership a lot of times. Hey, we're going to do this, that, or the other. We're going to transition to this energy or that. And you just have to understand it's a very, very large system that we are dealing with. We'll just skip over this one. We'll just get right into it. Okay, so here's some of the things that we really need to understand about California, though. California is isolated from all the other states in terms of crude supply. So this is a map of the pipelines in the United States. And what you'll notice is the red lines are crude. There are no red lines that connect California to the rest of the United States. Now there is a purple line. This is a refined product. This is actually after gasoline and diesel is refined. It'll go from California to Arizona and Nevada. So when we make policy, it actually affects our neighbors in our neighboring states. But what that means is you're fine. We're isolated. So we call it an energy island. And go ahead to the next slide. No pipeline infrastructure, limited rail and truck transportation. So what that means is if we can't produce enough crude in the state of California to meet our demand, we then have to import it over the open ocean. And that comes in through ports in Los Angeles and the Bay Area. So every barrel of oil, so think of it this way. When they say, let's shut down the production in a particular oil field, 1,000 barrels a day, that's 1,000 barrels that now has to be brought in over the open ocean and through our ports. That is the trade-off. That's the decision that's being made in places like Santa Barbara County when they say they're going to shut down these operations. Okay, next. And this is a really interesting chart. This is from the California Energy Commission. And what it shows is, overall demand has remained relatively steady over the years. You see there's some ups and downs. There is a general downward trend, but it has been stubborn, steady in demand. There was a little bit of a bounce during COVID, but it's since regained much of that. And the overall trend is that we're producing less in California, which is this blue area, and more foreign oil. It's just unmistakable. And this is not an oil industry graph. This is the California Energy Commission. This is right on their website. So that's what's happened. And we are now producing less than 25% of our crude that we need on a daily basis within the state. This is a crisis that's happening. It needs to change. Okay, next. And then just a little bit on the price of gasoline. We hear a lot about that. Of course, we all, we all fill up from time to time. And what you just need to understand is that California has nearly, I think this is about a month old now. The first $1.22 cents a gallon that you pay is for the state. And that goes to taxes and fees and environmental programs. And they go to programs like the low carbon fuel standard and cap and trade. And so these are environmental programs that they run, but they're not free. And we, the consumers, pay for them. And so when they look at why is California has the highest gas prices in the nation, this is a primary factor in why that's the case. Of course, there's other factors. This is not the only one, but this is a big one. Okay, go ahead. Okay, now let's get into really more the crux of the issue tonight that I want to talk about. This is our transportation fuel supply chain. And you actually have a copy of this diagram on your table. We call this the placemat. And really what this is our effort of sort of describing the transportation fuel system in the state of California. And so this includes, biofuels, crude oil, and even electron generation, because that is an increasing component of our overall portfolio. But what we thought when we were talking to legislators about this is that no one really had a good idea of what the entire system looked like. And they were they're trying to make changes to a system, but they really don't understand all the components of that system. And so, this is just a diagram to kind of show the different components. You've got refineries, you've got electron transmission, a lot of different things come together to make things go down the road in the state of California. And this is our sort of schematic diagram of that. Go ahead. And so we commissioned a study. It was done by Turner and Mason consultants. We didn't do it in-house. We said, what are the investments that are necessary to be made in this system in order to, successfully do the transition that they're proposing? And what are some of the pinch points? And so, we got some really interesting conclusions from the study that they did. It's about a year old now. The points are still really important. And they're really focused on just several components, several portions of that diagram that you guys have in front of you. And so, the main constraints that we're seeing, crude oil production is in sharp decline in the state of California. That's a critical issue. Crude oil pipelines are increasingly facing threats of shutdown based on that decline. Marine facilities have congestion. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And ultimately, refineries are facing some very difficult choices. And I think that's played out. This is a year old. In the year since this was published, there's been 2 refinery announcements in the state of California that they're closing. So while the governor's saying these refiners are making more money than ever, the refiners are announcing closures, and it just doesn't add up. If you're making money, you're not going to close your doors. And the reality is, like, these constraints are happening, and it's not going to be good for anybody if these refineries close. Okay, next. So about the crude oil production decline, and many of you are royalty owners, so you probably are well aware of the decline. We're seeing something around 15% annual decline. That's much faster than was ever anticipated in CARB's transition plan. And so, at this rate of decline, I mean, it's basically just falling off a cliff in California, and it's just faster than I think even the government is anticipating. And it's largely driven by a lack of permits. This is not because the resources are dwindling. There's plenty of oil still in the ground in California. It's the regulatory environment and it's the ability to get drilling permits that are driving this significant decline. This is a choice. The government is choosing to have domestic production decline in the state of California. Okay, nice. Another critical issue that came to light is this concept of minimum threshold volumes for distribution pipelines. And so if you think about it, you know, the state has the refining centers in the Bay Area and the Los Angeles area and the oil production in areas in between. A lot of that in Kern County does about 80% of the state's production, but you know, there is production on the coast. There's some up in Monterey. And this is moved largely by pipeline to those refining centers. And so what happens is the pipelines have a minimum requirement. So I think when the city embarked upon their transition, they're not thinking about, you know, what's going to happen to the pipelines, but they need to keep about a 30% minimum volume in order to be viable. I mean, this is heavy crude that's moving through the pipelines that, you know, they just can't adjust down to, you know, 2, 3, 4%. It has to be at least 30. And next slide. And what we're seeing is many of the pipelines, we're getting quite close to those minimum volumes. So the lines that go from the Central Valley to San Francisco are right near, you know, right at 30%. So it's right at the minimum threshold. The other ones are a little bit above that, but still with the declining crude, those are also threatened. And what happens is they don't decline slowly down to zero. Once they hit that minimum threshold, they simply have to shut the pipeline off. And so it goes from 30% to zero overnight. There are physical limitations to transporting crude oil this way. Excuse me. Okay, another pinch point are the marine facilities. As I said, if we don't produce it in state, we have to bring it in from over the open oceans. And we're seeing increasing traffic and congestion in our ports. It's also exacerbated by the Air Resources Board regulation. It's called the at-berth regulation. So this means when ships are at berth, they either have to have a control like cone-like device that goes over the stacks, or they plug in, or they have to pay a mitigation fee. And what's happening is that the technology to capture the exhaust is not feasible. It's not ready. It's not feasible. The infrastructure is not there to plug them in. And so essentially the operators at this point have to either pay the fee, or they will barge it in using some other type of a vessel. And so this is just an unworkable program for the oil and gas producers. And then finally, you know, this is where we kind of land. The modelers, the consultants said, look, what we're seeing in all our scenarios is based on all the inputs. We are modeling several different cases, and what these are number of refineries. This is over several years, and you can see, you know, the number of refineries drop off faster in some cases than others. But in all of the cases, refinery closures are imminent. And like I said, this study was done a year ago. Since it was done, we've had 2 refineries announce closures. So this state went from having dozens of refineries down to 11 last year, down to 9. And with the announced closure of Phillips 66 in the LA area, and the Valero refinery in the Bay Area, we're going to be down to 7 refineries statewide. And so we've heard, you know, economists say, well, look, it's going to drive the price of fuel up. There's just no way around it when you lose that much of your supply. So this is a huge threat. I think it's so those announcements and this information even caught the attention of the California leadership, and they've recently been sort of working on some things that they can do to perhaps alleviate this. We'll see what comes out of that. I mean, it's welcome that they are recognizing that there's an issue that needs to be dealt with. That's it's been, you know, many years in the making, and so, you know, we'll welcome the conversation, but there's a lot of work to be done to do something about these imminent threats that that we talked about tonight. And just real briefly, there's only a couple more slides. The oil and gas industry is super important. 150,000 jobs, more or less, directly in the industry in the state. 500,000 direct and indirect. That means contractors and consultants. And 64 billion in local, state, and federal tax revenues, including right here in Santa Barbara County. And somewhere around 338 billion in total economic contribution. I heard an economist say, you know, the oil and gas industry is responsible for about 8% of the economy, which doesn't sound like that much, but it's the first 8%. Because if you don't have that 8%, you don't have the rest of it. So that's a good way to look at it. You need these products, you know, and we rely on these products for our for our jobs and to heat our homes, and and agriculture to feed our families. And so it's just a really important industry here in the state of California. And I think that's my last slide. Yeah, so happy to take a few questions from the group if you have any. Ed, did I do okay with time?
You did great.
Okay,
I'll
excellent.
tell you all, I've heard the 1 hour version of this house, and it's phenomenal, and I apologize for limiting you to 20 minutes. But national security and supply chain, NARO California has officially asked for congressional investigation into threats posed to our national security and our supply chain by California's energy policies. As most of you know, the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles are the 2 largest ports in the nation. They're massive. And we have a massive military presence, as you all know, including Space Force base real close to us here. And it all runs on petroleum. Everything coming in and out of those ports is coming by trains, planes, trucks, and ships, all heavy users of petroleum. What happens if something happens? Natural disaster, embargoes, political unrest around the world, or World War III, God help us. But what happens? What happens to our nation? I think that's something that should be addressed nationally also. It will be an absolute disaster for California. But I want to thank you very much. Are you looking into that aspect of it? Are you pushing politicians to look at that?
I understand the argument, and I think it's a valid one. Like primarily, our members are focused on working with California to make it better. I think you're right. I think it is a national security issue. Thus far, that hasn't gotten much traction in California, and that's really been our focus, is working with the leadership to address some of the concerns that we talked about tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Your map of the island didn't show what's now called the Sable Pipeline. Is that not considered crude, or is that refined?
It may not have been big enough to see, but that's a crude oil line. Yeah, that's crude. So it should have been on the map, but that would have been within the state. That doesn't go outside of the state of California. Other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ben. I want to let you all know that there's even more people online watching this. This is being broadcast on the web. So hello to everyone out there. What I want to do right now is acknowledge our national office, NARO National. Our executive director, John Corcoran, and our office manager, Kim Merritt, have gone out of their way to help us with this. And we at NARO National are just blessed to have them. They're amazing people. And I want to let you know also that our national board has taken, is paying attention to California, as goes California, as goes the rest of the nation, some think. So even the people in Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana are talking now and saying, what can we do to help? So there is concern nationwide with what's going on here. So I thank you to National. I know, Ken and John, you're at the Texas convention right now. Thank you for being online. Next, we're going to talk about the legal issues we've been involved in. And we have here tonight our general counsel, Ed Riddler, who's been involved in all the litigation we've been involved in, and you'll hear about that. And then with regards to our pending lawsuit, hopefully, over SB 1137, he's brought in his co-counsel, Mike Mills, with the law firm of Stoll Reeves out of Sacramento, nationwide law firm, and unfortunately Mike couldn't be here tonight. But a shout out to Mike. The first piece of litigation we got involved in was Measure Z in Monterey County, which all of these measures, Measure P, Measure Z, Measure J, Measure X, all of them have been backed by the same NGOs, the same law firm, Shoot Mahali, et cetera, throughout the state. They even come over to Bakersfield and try to create problems. So the first thing we did was we had to go to our national board. NARO, in its 45-year history, or at that time, 38, 40-year history, had never been involved in a lawsuit. They'd written amicus briefs that they'd filed in other lawsuits supporting the lawsuits, but no chapter, the national organization had never been a plaintiff or a defendant in any litigation. California was allowed to be the first because of how egregious and unconstitutional Measure Z was. So with the group of, I'll give a shout out at Measure Z, we got 84 royalty owners as named co-plaintiffs on that lawsuit, largely from the San Bernardino field. The person that headed it up was Walt Duflock. He did an amazing job as chairman of the royalty owner plaintiffs committee there. And we fought hard. 5 oil companies also sued: Chevron, Aero, Cedar Sea, Trio Petroleum, and Eagle Petroleum. And then there was NARO California with 84 named co-plaintiffs. Well, that went on for a little while and we won. We won a resounding decision at the Superior Court level and had Measure Z thrown out based upon preemption. And one of the things that's in your packet that people don't seem to pay attention to, and Mr. Renwick gets upset every time I bring this up, because it really has no legal weight, because it didn't make it into the final decision. But this got to me. I've always felt that the government is taking my rights. They are trying to take my rights. They are violating my constitutional rights to my property, and they're taking them. And when we got the judge's intended decision in Measure Z, 40-some pages long, 53 pages long, and this is in your packet, and it's highlighted on page 46 and 47. We filed for takings. Here's what the judge said, and it's just the last few sentences. Consequently, should it take effect, Measure Z would affect a facial regulatory taking of CRCs and some of NARO's members' property. However, because the court has found that policies LU 122 and LU 123 are preempted, the court need not to determine an appropriate remedy for the taking. So you have a judge saying, yeah, there's a taking occurring. Now, it's very specific as to what that taking pertained to, but that gives me some hope. And I have included that quote in a number of letters I've written to Ventura County, LA, et cetera, in opposition of their oil shutdown measures. But I think most of you here would agree that the threat to your property rights is a taking if it succeeds. Anyway, we won that case at the Superior Court level. The county did not appeal, but the interveners did, the NGOs appealed to the appellate court. We won a unanimous decision at the appellate court. It was then appealed to the state Supreme Court. We won a unanimous decision at the state Supreme Court. The Measure D decision is cast in stone as case law. And that is what perpetrated 3233, which is what Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors, certain members, are trying to use to, we believe, rationalize, because it is technically law now, but we feel it's unconstitutional. Their proposed oil shutdown ordinance now. And this was discussed by me at the Planning Commission, or the Board of Supervisors meeting on the 13th, and was addressed in my letter to the board and in Ed Rennick's letter, that we're fighting in Los Angeles too. We filed 3 lawsuits, the California chapter has. Ventura County over their anti-oil ordinance, as did the producers. We worked with the producers and our royalty owner group, and we negotiated a settlement with the county on that one. Number 3, we sued the city of Los Angeles along with the producers, and we put together a group of royalty owners. And we won. And we won based upon the Measure Z decision at the Supreme Court. What the judge said, I was in court, and the city's attorneys are talking about, well, Your Honor, this, he says, no, Measure Z decision, I don't have any flexibility. Well, we're going to talk to you about the city of Los Angeles is now coming back, believing that they are also protected by 3233, and they've already had their first public meeting on adopting that ordinance again, now that 3233 has been signed by the governor. So they're relying on the same unconstitutional law, that's what we contend, that Santa Barbara County is relying on. Ed, did I say anything wrong yet? Spot on, okay. Now, current status. One thing I want to talk to you about is SB 1137, the 3,200 foot setback for oil wells from sensitive receptors. Right now, the average setback is about 300 feet. I think that's what it is in Santa Maria. I'm sure it was at one time. That's 2.1 acres, a 300 foot setback. 3,200 foot setback is a 6,400 foot diameter, more than a mile, 738.5 acres. That's huge. That's more than an entire section. Sensitive receptor is a house, basically anything open to the public. And they're trying to, I guess, expand the definition to expand it to apply to other things. But even your own house takes your mineral rights. If you have your own house on your property, it takes your mineral rights. If your neighbor builds a house within 3,200 feet of your mineral rights, in our opinion, it takes them. You will never be able to get a drilling permit. Anything existing within that 3,200 foot health protection zone, it is subject to onerous additional regulation and costs and expenses and fees. And those wells can't get permits to do even standard maintenance, and they will be shut down fairly quickly. So this is why every farmer, every rancher, and even the developers should be scared to death of 3233. If I know that on one of my family's leases in Cat Canyon Field, which by the way, are all infringed on by 3233. There's a 3,200 foot, or there's a sensitive receptor within 3,200 feet of all of our leases, even though they're kind of out in the country. We as royalty and mineral owners will have to object. If my neighbor wants to build a house, I'm going to have to object to the building permit. I'm going to have to try to stop it. If I own 500 acres, I'm a farmer, and I want to sell 20 acres to a developer. Well, a developer, by the sheer development of what he's developing, is going to take my mineral rights, and I don't get compensated. Who's taking our mineral rights in that case? The state. And so everyone should be aware of this. Your existing houses on your farms and ranches now have a 32, and your fruit stands, whatever it may be, have a 3,200-foot radius, 6,400-foot diameter, 738.5 acres. So be afraid, be very afraid of that one, but we think we can beat it in court. And we will be discussing that in a little bit here. As I mentioned, AB 3233, local control. That was a response to Measure Z, and it clearly states it in the legislation that it's to overcome Measure Z. And basically is telling cities and counties that you can regulate oil so long as the regulations, and I'm paraphrasing here, are stricter than state regulations or the regulations, the intent of regulations to shut oil production down. So what's happening is in our LA case that we just won and had the city's anti-oil ordinance rescinded, they're readopting it, believing they're covered under 3233. We will be challenging it there. And so we've been telling all these other counties to hold off, and we made it very clear to Santa Barbara County, both in our attorney's letter and my letter, hold off. Why go to all the expense of going through with an oil shutdown ordinance here? And it is going to cost them a bunch of money to come up with this. They have until October, the staff does, to come up with the ordinance for Santa Barbara County. Why not wait and see how things play out in LA? We may be able to solve it there. And so we're hoping that saner hills will prevail, that I doubt it in Santa Barbara County, and that they'll give us some breathing room and wait until that one is settled. But we feel real confident about that, right, Ed? He's come up with an incredible legal theory on that. One other thing that everyone should be concerned about, and no one seems to have it on their radar, is AB 2716. This was a law proposed by a legislator from down in the Inglewood, Culver City area, Inglewood Field, Culver City area, that was going to require, I don't know the real complete specifics of it, but it would require that wells producing 15 barrels a day or less had to be shut down by a certain time. I think it was 2 years. If they weren't shut in by then, there would be a $10,000 a day fine. Well, it got negotiated down to $10,000 a month, and then it got negotiated down to just the Inglewood Field in Culver City. That's one producer, Sentinel Peak, and one oil field basically, and one group of royalty owners down there attacked by the state with a piece of state legislation. And Sentinel Peak is now sued over that, thankfully. And I support them thoroughly and their royalty owners. But what's to prevent a legislator in any community saying, well, I can't get this through a board of supervisors. I'll just go to my buddies at the state capitol and we'll do it on a state level. Let's shut down Canyon Field. There's nothing to stop them that I can see. We need to defeat 2716, and we need to wish Sentinel Peak all the best in their fight there. The other issue is the governor's de facto permitting moratorium. The producers can't get permits. We've gone from getting, well over 1,000 permits a year to getting a handful. What is it, 50, 60 last year or something like that? They're intentionally withholding the processing of applications for permits. It's very intentional. And that's going to be a tough fight, but we're prepared to fight that too. And it looks like Kern County may have it straightened out with their EIR, but the rest of us, what do? This is a property rights issue, people, and it's basically killing us by regulation and by intentional inactivity. Let's not process these permits. And that is what is happening, and it's very wrong. I wanted to address amortization, and this is where Mr. Renwick can really come in. We keep hearing about amortization, and we've addressed this many times because we've had to address it in Ventura and LA and everywhere else where they're talking about how we're going to amortize. What that means is when they change the zoning to where they're not going to allow oil in that particular zoning, oil production, you're now a non-conforming use. It would be like you have a small facility that's making paint or something, and all of a sudden they change the zoning around it to residential. You're now no longer a conforming use, you're a non-conforming use within that residential zoning. They can't just shut you down. So what they do is they study it and they come up with a formula and they say, you've got 10 years to move. And you need to account for that. Well, you can move a small paint manufacturing, you can move a hardware store. You cannot move your mineral rights. The only way to move the minerals that are encompassed by your mineral rights is to produce them. And the problem for the people who are trying to amortize these is it's a depleting asset. And there's law on that. And we contend very strongly that you can't amortize a competing asset. I think there's rule number 3. This well here, this was my great-grandfather's 3rd well. Drilled in May of 1903. First gusher in the Santa Maria field. There's a mural of it in Kay's Country Kitchen. Everyone thinks that it's Bill Vaughn on the wall there. No, that's Pinal 3 and great-grandpa down there somewhere in the trench coat. But that photo was taken in June of 1903. That well, Pinal 3 and Pinal 2, which came in 6 weeks before, are on Orchid Hill. And Pacific Coast Energy, still right in the back here, is still producing from those wells. 122 years. You tell me how you're going to amortize my mineral rights. I can't move them. How are you going to tell me, well, just stop pumping in 10 years? Plug and abandon, you're done. What got me into this originally was we had a lease near the town of Gary, 148 acres with 12 wells that Texaco produced on. I was young, I wasn't paying any attention. Evidently they shut it in, they plugged and abandoned, quit claim the lease in 1990, 12 wells they shut in. What happened was, and it's all intensely farmed. There's a vineyard on half of it and intensely farmed row crop ground on the other half. What happened was landman approached my family. We leased it. We didn't even know we had it. We leased it. And by gosh, there's a lot of oil under it. And so tell me how you're going to amortize it. When one company thought in 1990, well, we're giving up, we're done. And then another company comes in 20 years later, 15 years later, and says, no, we got a way to get oil out of that. You think about it, there are mineral owners, probably 2 or 3 million mineral owners throughout Pennsylvania, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Texas, Colorado, that never dreamed of being royalty owners, actually being able to lease to an oil company and having production and getting paid royalties. 30 years ago, they didn't believe they'd ever be royalty owners. But someone figured out how to access the oil and gas in that shale. And now you have towns booming, you have generational wealth created, you have farms saved. You have NARO National has given testimony before Congressional Committee, Agricultural Committee, on how in Pennsylvania and other states, oil production has saved family farms. And I think some of you in here who are in ag, your oil production in the past has really helped you out. Well, it's really threatened now, and we need to get our faces out there. Ed, why don't you come up here for a moment? I want to introduce you to Ed Renwick. Ed Renwick has been an oil and gas attorney for decades. Harvard Law.
Stanford.
So, excuse me, Stanford Law. I'm sorry. I knew that too. Stanford Law, and he has been a good friend, and he has been the brains, and I do mean brains, behind a lot of what we've done and the successes we've had. And he has come up with some amazing legal strategies and arguments that have been winning. And he's got them now. We're going to need support. We're going to need those of you that can to participate with us as we continue our fight. Ed,
Let's give a round of applause to Ed.
Well, in order to prove that I'm really a licensed lawyer, I brought my legal-sized yellow pad, and I'm wearing a tie. And when you see a guy with an old guy with a yellow legal-sized pad and wearing a tie and, you know, dark suits and whatnot, you say, I think SOB is probably a lawyer. And I confess, I've been a lawyer for 65 years, I think. And you know what, I'm not smart enough to retire, and I'm still having fun. So if you'll allow me to, I'm going to try and say a few words about some legal theories, and I'm going to try to make it understandable. And that's sometimes hard to do for people like me, so I hope you bear with me. And if I don't make it simple, anytime you don't understand something I'm saying, break in and okay, first of all, I want to talk a little bit about 3233. That is the law that was enacted to basically the legislature wanted to overturn the Supreme Court's opinion, California Supreme Court's opinion in the Monterey case. The Monterey case, when you boil it all down, the Monterey case says pretty much one thing, very narrow, that when you're talking about methods and practices used in the oil industry to maximize ultimate production. We're talking about that, just methods and practices, maximum production. The regulation of those methods and practices has to be done at the state level, not at county and city levels. And that's because that is a matter of statewide concern. And when you read the California Constitution, and I think I can remember this right, Article 11, Section 7 and 5. That's burned into my mind. When those two constitutional provisions say is that counties and cities, and this is what I'm saying about it, counties and cities get to regulate on local level. They don't get to regulate on statewide matters. And whether something is a statewide level matter or a local matter is a matter of law for a judge to decide. The legislature has input on that and will be given great attention, but it's a matter of law for the court to decide. And I would say that when the Monterey case, the Supreme Court didn't just come right out and say that this oil and gas or this question of methods and practices is a matter of statewide concern, but the way they wrote it and what they said and the outcome, I think, requires means that was what the California Supreme Court said. And in the Los Angeles case, that's the way our judge in the Los Angeles case construed what the Supreme Court was saying. So I think when you talk about methods and practices, to maximize oil and gas production. Methods and practices to do that, that is a matter of statewide, not local concern. And there's a very practical reason for that. The state of California, at the state level, has given the oil and gas supervisor the job of balancing. On one hand, he has to try and reduce greenhouse gases. On the other hand, he has to make sure that we have sufficient energy, and that's talking oil and gas, to satisfy the needs of California. And so how can the supervisor of oil and gas do the balancing job if some city down the way that happens to be sitting on top of an oil field, like the city of Los Angeles, number of oil fields, if they can go their way, it is not, the supervisor of oil and gas can't share the decisions that have to be made with a local city or a local county. It just flat out doesn't work. And that is where I think the California Supreme Court was going. And we argued that, by the way, in our brief. And I think that had a lot to do with how the California Supreme Court ruled. Okay, so what does that mean about 3233? Well, what the legislature has done in 3233 is say, don't worry about what the Supreme Court did. You are entitled now as you local governments are entitled to regulate oil and gas and they specifically refer to methods and practices. Well, my answer to that, and this is an easily understood legal concept, too bad. Article 11, sections 5 and 7 of the California Constitution say that you cannot, they say that methods and practices are matters of statewide concern. So I say it's constant. The Constitution requires in California that, well, let me put it very simply. If the legislature wants to extend the power of local governments to regulate on methods and practices, the first thing they have to do is rewrite the Constitution of California. That's a lot harder than passing legislation. So did I make it clear? I mean, yes, sir.
If I could just get your opinion on, do you think that has specific nexus for some reasons, oil and gas, and not for the things like Santa Barbara County choosing to interpret the APCD rulings different than all the other coastal communities or counties, or Santa Barbara County choosing to hear why hourly labor wages would be different than other counties? Is that the same nexus?
Ed, can you repeat the question for the stream, please?
Well, look for the microphone.
My ears aren't as good as they used to be. I may have missed some of that.
Yeah. I was just curious if by that same nexus with the state constitution, Santa Barbara County has had, many recent ideas about interpreting the APCD's rulings differently than other coastal counties, so that they choose to interpret with stricter rulings. Would that be different in your opinion than how they chose to rule in that case?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm not as familiar with what Santa Barbara County has been doing in that regard as you are. But is it Santa Barbara? Well, I'll ask you a question. is what you are seeing Santa Barbara do, is that done by your local air quality management district? Well, I think local air quality management districts have the power to enact as they see fit, or to interpret as they see fit. And it may be up to the state to try and pull them into unison. I can see that there is probably, well, no, I could make the argument, this is fun when you get into something like this. I could make the argument that, well, air quality issues in each county or each city are a little different. So let's give the local air quality people some leeway to do their own thing. But when it's something that has to be uniform across the state, if there's anything that requires uniformity across the state, then I would say, yeah, local governments don't get to decide it. But you've also got to remember that an air quality management district is not, actually, it's empowered by the state. It's a state created entity. It isn't a local entity the way a city or a county is.
Let me tell you, you just sparked a fire. I'll tell you what's gonna happen. His mind's going. I'm gonna get a call at 8:30 PM on a Sunday and say, oh, I was thinking about that air quality question percent. And you know what? There was this case in 1923, and I think we can do this and do that and do that. That's what's gonna happen, right, Ed?
Well, once I get chewing on like an old dog, once you get chewing on a bone, you don't want to let it go, you know?
Yeah, you call it your, what is it, chin scratch and looking out the window thought?
That's the most valuable time that a lawyer can spend is staring out the window and scratching his chin. And that's something I've learned over the last 65 years. If you don't do that, you're not doing your job.
Great question. And I'm gonna think about it too, even though I don't understand all of it. Well, they're using everything about us to have.
I think we all ought to sit down and really get into this and have some fun.
We're here all night.
Okay, well, I think I've done all I can do with 32, 33, other than to say, well, where are we going from here? Here's what's happened. The ordinance, the anti-oil ordinance was tossed out by the judge in reliance on the Monterey case decided by the California Supreme Court. And so what has happened, of course, now, the city did not appeal that decision. And by the way, in our complaint, our second cause of action was not just preemption. First cause of action was preemption. That meant that, the state of California has already has legislation, Public Resources Code Section 3601, which is which preempts what the city of Los Angeles did. Our second cause of action didn't rely on that exclusively. It said what the city of Los Angeles has done violates the California Constitution. The judge ruled with us on that as well, the trial judge. The city did not appeal that. I think we've got, there's a doctrine called res judicata, which says once something's been decided by the party, between the parties, it's been decided. And so I'm certainly going to argue res judicata in the Los Angeles case, because yes, there will be another Los Angeles case, or at least a continuation, maybe a continuation of the same case. But the issue is coming back because as soon as 3233 was enacted, the city decided we're just gonna reenact the same law. Only we're gonna do it after the 3233 goes into effect. Because now 3233 says we can do it. And that's when I say, oops, not without rewriting the Constitution of California, you can't do it. And am I right? I think I'm right. How will I find out? Live long enough to see the decision come down. That's, yeah. Okay, I think I've done all the damage to 3233 that I can do. So now I want to say something about, I'm gonna look at my yellow pad, make sure I carry this around for a reason, yes. I'm talking about SB 1137. That's Senate Bill 1137 that was enacted that sets up the 3,200 foot setback. First of all, I will say that I think it is the legislature based that decision on a lot of bogus science. But we have a problem because one of our rules, the standard of review, when a court reviews what the legislature did, and if we're trying to say how do I put it? If we're trying to say that the legislature relied on bogus information and came to the wrong conclusion for that reason, so that the regulation is, or so that the law isn't based on any rational basis. The problem that we face, and I think this is an example of that, by the way. I think it is a bogus. They did rely on bogus information, but the problem is that the standard of review that courts have to use when they examine what the legislature has done what they have to do is decide not whether it's bogus, but is there any conceivable rational basis for what the legislature did? If the court can say there's no rational basis, no imaginable rational basis, then the court has to say, well, if the legislative, I'm getting it backwards, if the court says that there is no rational basis, then they can say there's no rational basis for what the no imaginable rational basis. They can say, okay, this is a case where the legislature went too far, and they can toss it out. That's a very heavy lift. I've argued that. I've never won on that. It's a darn tough standard to meet. But I think that 1137 is susceptible to challenge on other constitutional grounds. It's due process, but it's a little different twist. I think what 1137 is subject to is a kind of a little unknown or often overlooked area of due process. And that is, there is authority, both federally and locally, that is our California Supreme Court, where they say, and I'm simplifying this, that your neighbor, the legislature cannot delegate to your neighbor the authority to control what you do on your property. So if Ed Hazard wants to grow chickens next door on my property, the legislature can't give me the authority to say whether or not Ed Hazard, who's my next door neighbor, uh, can't grow chickens on his land. It's an absurd example, but anyway, so what do we have now looking at 1137? Well, you will remember that 1137 says that if you have an oil field here, you got an oil well right here, and someone comes in and gets within 3,200 feet of your property and builds a house or puts down a trailer, I guess, let's let them put down a double wide. Okay, that'd be nice. They put a double wide down there, they're within 3,200 feet. And all of a sudden you can't get on your oil well, you can't get the permits you need to do any re-drilling, for instance. And what's going to happen after a while is that well, since you can't do what you need to do to get the permits to keep it going, that well is going to poop out. And so your next door neighbor, by having the right to come in and cuddle up, he can come up and be very close, put down his double wide trailer just a few feet as far as the 1137 is concerned. 1137 doesn't work both ways. 1137 says the oil company can't be within 3,200 feet or even stay within 3,200 feet permanently. And as a practical matter, that means that a landowner, next door person next door can come in and snuggle up to your oil well, and all of a sudden you get stuck with a whole lot of extra expenses because there's some special testing and all that you have to do. But beyond that, you simply can't get the permits that you need to keep that well alive. That, I think, violates the idea, the due process idea, that a neighbor can't control what goes on your property. It's just, did I make that simple enough? I think it's a very simple concept, but it's often overlooked. At any rate, am I running out of time? Okay. You can shut me up anytime you want. Okay. Well, let me see if I have anything else here I needed to talk about. Those are the two big ones that are causing me a lot of worry right now. But
if I could interrupt, one thing that's in your packet, he's talking about the sections of the California Constitution with regards to 3233 and what Santa Barbara is trying to do here. And he mentions the sections of the Constitution in here. And so read the letter from NARO, California, opposing what the board was doing, and Mr. Renwick's letter. Thank you.
I've also done some thinking. I think I gave you some preliminary thoughts one time about my views on 2716. What's the real vice, the worst thing about 2716 is that it takes the oil field, one oil field, and says, and I can't remember, I think it's 5 or 6 years, you got to shut it down. It doesn't just try to regulate what they're doing. It basically orders that after X number of years, which I think is 5 or 6, maybe 8, it has to be shut down. I've got it in there somewhere and I can't remember exactly And anyway, that, do I think, what's wrong with that? Well, I think that's a pretty classic taking. What it's doing, the government isn't moving in and planting on itself on your property. But what the government is doing is denying you use of your property. Now, there's a lot of complicated issues. Is all of your use denied or only some uses? And there's case authority that would probably allow some uses to be denied, but not all uses. At the very least, your operators who only hold by lease are being denied the use of their property. And what that does, without your operator on your property, your royalties are gone. I think that it's a pretty good taking case. And whether we can also shut it down on some other basis, I'll have to think about it. I'm not there yet. But I do think it's a good taking case. So have I exhausted you with legal theory? Legal theories are a lot of fun. You know, when I was in law school, I had a law professor in constitutional law who, every time he turned around, he found a constitutional issue. And I used to think this guy's crazy. And you know what? I've gotten the same way. What can I say? I can apologize. I'm sorry for wasting your time, but it's stuff that we lawyers just love to talk about. Right, Vincent?
Right.
He's the other guy wearing a dark suit and a tie. Do you have one of these yellow pads with you? Oh, well, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Renwick has put in countless hours over the last 14, 15 years. I think Vincent, Maribel, you can attest to that. And he's given advice to both of you too. And I think you've sought advice from him. Absolutely amazing fountain of knowledge and ability. The wisdom there is not to be underestimated. So thank you. His ideas on our first and second cause of action in Los Angeles were brilliant, and it really sets us up to defeat 3233. I want to give a shout out to our past royalty owner plaintiffs. They really stepped up. Measure Z was a statewide decision, impacted all of us positively. The people in LA, that's why we won, or big reason why we won, was the Measure Z decision. And those royalty owners, they spent the time, the effort, and the money, and they joined up as co-plaintiffs with us on that. The same thing in Ventura County. Royalty owners stepped up. Same thing in Los Angeles. That's what we're going to need statewide. And I'm hoping some of you in this room, some of you already have agreed to participate. We appreciate that. Some of you contributed. We appreciate that. But a real shout out to my fellow royalty and mineral owners. As I mentioned, NARO is a volunteer organization. We don't have paid people in NARO, California, other than I may now have an assistant because I'm getting overwhelmed. But people like Roy Reed have donated a ton of time, still donating time to the organization. I have too. And so we really need royalty owners in Santa Barbara County and throughout the state to step up. In your packages is a letter to potential royalty owner plaintiffs, along with a form for you to fill out. You all have Mr. Renwick's card. Feel free to call either Mr. Renwick or myself. If you have questions, comments, etc., let us know if you can be involved. We urge you to. This is truly a matter of constitution, property rights, and our very way of life. It's not just about the oil industry. That's why I'm an American to the core. And my background is largely agriculture, and we are all under threat if we allow these things to stand. You think, what if they wiped out the oil industry today? Just boom, it's gone tomorrow morning. Who's their next target? They're not going to stop. So we need to stop them in the courts and in a court of public opinion. And we have opportunity now. And Ben, maybe you can say something about this, or I'll ask you, but Ben's presentation was important because California has been driven to the edge of an energy cliff, the likes of which we've never seen. You think about when World War II started, we had gas rationing here, but we were producing more than enough oil than we needed, but the military needed it. We now import 75% of our oil into this state. I lived through the 73 and the 78, 79 oil embargoes, as I'm sure a lot of you did. Got my driver's license in 73. And I remember waiting in line for 45 minutes to get gas, only to see that it was out when I got to the pump. The 10-gallon limit, odd and even days. And we didn't import nearly as much oil as we import now. So this is a serious threat, and we are headed to the edge of a cliff because of an unrealistic, idiotic ideology out of Sacramento and elsewhere. And they are now realizing it. They're starting to realize it. They've pushed us to the edge of this cliff. And if we go off it, it's going to be bad, people. And we're about there. As you know, the 2 refineries here shut down. Our producers are having real problems finding a place for our oil. They're having to haul it over the hill. That's not as environmentally sound as refining it right here. My family's oil mainly went for asphalt production. I live in an old neighborhood in Bakersfield. They just finally, over the past 6 years, repaved the whole thing. And I'm sitting there, why won't they let us produce our oil to make this asphalt? Why are they wanting to import the oil? It doesn't make any sense, but they're starting to wake up. We see cracks in the armor. Since the current governor was elected, I don't think there's been a better time to potentially make progress in Sacramento. Absolutely no guarantees, but now is the time to put maximum pressure on through the courts, through writing letters, through getting active. No one's going to protect your rights for you like you can. You can do it individually, and you can do it as part of a group additionally. Join NARO California, join with us, help us fight this fight, not just for yourselves, but for our fellow Californians, for the future generations, so on and so forth. But I really want to leave you with a sense of some hope, because we see it. Ben, you mentioned a little bit about it. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but there are cracks in Sacramento right now. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, they're at that 9-10.
Sure, I'll just weigh in briefly that I think it really is the the announced closure of refineries has a way of sort of getting anyone's attention in the state, and I think that it really flies in the face of the narrative that these companies are making unreasonable profits, and the different things that have been said. When businesses choose to close, it means something's not right. That's just an unmistakable signal, and I think that's largely driving some of the discussions that we're seeing right now up in Sacramento.
Thank you, Ben.
You're welcome.
So you all need to be aware with 3233, many of you here are farmers, ranchers, got properties. This could pit neighbor against neighbor. If your neighbor's building a house, even if you're building your own house or putting up a fruit stand, you got 6,400 foot diameter, 738.5 acres. Watch out. And I think that the development community, the realtors, everyone else are starting to wake up to that too. I know that my family, we're going to have to protect our interests and do what it takes to do so. But I ask all of you to take with you tonight the knowledge that we're out there trying to look out for your interests as best we can. We need your help. We need you to join. We need you to contribute. I ask you to do that to the maximum extent you can. We have a fight on our hands, but we potentially see light at the end of the tunnel. So far, we're batting 1,000 with our litigation. I'm tired of litigation, but we're going to need some more. And we're going to need to be putting the pressure on locally and in Sacramento and probably nationally too. So please, please join with us tonight. Amber in the back can help you sign up. We can help you with donations. You've got QR codes on your tables. Please do whatever you can. We would appreciate it. Any questions, comments? I mean, this was the first in what we hope will be a series of many, and we'll be back here for sure. But whatever advice you have afterwards, we're going to need to get our PowerPoints done a little more organized. But we're here for you. So questions, comments?
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Well, I will be hanging around. Ed will be hanging around. I want to thank everyone that joined us online. I know we were having some problems and some of you couldn't hear certain portions or whatever. I've gotten a couple texts. We apologize. We'll clean the bugs out and we will keep rocking and rolling. So thank you and remain California energy proud. You're part of it. Thank you.